Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. We're checking out a much requested case, the Corsair 5000D Airflow in white. We're going to do a build with it, we're going to test the thermals, we're going to talk all about this case, so let's get into it. Alright, let's start off with panel removal. Pretty simple with this case, it's just 2 thumb screws for the main TG side panel, and like the 4000D, it just pops off nice and easy. It's got little latches at the front of the case to hold onto the glass, and there's also latches on the side panel too. So yeah, it doesn't fly off and do its own thing and go into orbit and do all weird things that cases shouldn't do. No, Lazy Susans are terrible for filming. I'll never buy one. Please stop telling me to use a Lazy Susan. Rear panel's the same, 2 more thumb screws. As you can see, we haven't opened this yet, so all of the tape and everything that holds all of the side panels down is still in here. So we'll just pull that off, and then we'll flip it open. One of the things I already like about this case is that it's got kind of like a panel in a panel, which means that if your cable management is pretty terrible, which is, I think it's going to be quite hard with this case, you can hide it, it's going to cover it up, and then you can put the side panel on top of it. Should actually make it easier if you've got bad cable management. But it's basically attached on a hinge with a magnet, and it just like opens, and you should just be able to lift that off to get that out of the way for when you're building, which again is something I rather like. In the basement, it's got this included panel, which I wasn't sure was included. I didn't know if this was an optional extra that you had to buy, but it turns out that this panel comes with the case, and we'll come back to this. This is a really nice little addition if you're doing a water-cooled build, or if you're wanting to utilize that space at the front of your case. So we'll come back to this. This is very, very cool. You can see that there's 2 3.5-inch hard drive bays down the bottom. This whole thing can be removed too, but included in there is all the accessories and screws that are for the case. So I won't go through all of that. This is all pretty standard stuff that you'll find with most cases, but yeah, not really heaps to talk about with that. But again, there are 2 of these drive sleds in this whole removable bay in the basement. There's 4 2.5-inch SSD mounting places on the back, so you've got these brackets that are included with the case that can all be removed for mounting the drives, and you can also mount an additional drive here on the back of the motherboard cutout. This can be removed as well to make it easy if you want to install up there. While we're down below, power supply support, 225mm for your power supply, maximum length if you remove this hard drive cage down here. So you've actually got quite a bit of expansion here, and if you really wanted to, it could probably go the entire length of the case, but you'd be hard pressed to find a desktop power supply that would actually go the whole length of the case. But yeah, if you really wanted to do it, I guess you could do that. There's a 6-way PWM fan hub that's built into the case, which is actually quite a nice little touch, and you can connect it up to your motherboard for full fan speed control. For our build, we won't be doing it that way because we've got another thing up our sleeve, but yeah, that's what you can do if you're not going to be using something like we're going to do. We're going to use a Commander Pro to control all of these. Cable management appears to be quite interesting. You've got these included cable raceways. Now, if this is taking up too much space for your type of build, you can remove these. There's only a few screws that hold them in, so if you want to do it a traditional way, that can also be done too. There's also this really wide cable raceway here for all of your power cables, so like your 24-pin power connector and all of that. And there's also grommets behind all of it, and everyone loves their rubber grommets. They are also included with this case as well. Here's a feature that I thought we might see more last year, but it turns out this is probably something we're going to see more this year in 2021, and that is side radiator mounting and side fan mounting for exhaust and intake, depending on the type of build that you're going to do. For this build, we're not going to be mounting a radiator here, we'll be mounting it at the top, but for a custom water-cooled setup, this is very, very cool. If you're using like a flat pump res combo, you could technically mount the flat pump res without any fans here, so you could have it all the way up against the back of the case, and that would look really cool. If you really wanted to, you can remove this so you can mount fans and radiators to it and then place it back in the case, or you could use it with this panel that we're going to address in a little while for cable managing stuff, so you can hide stuff behind it, so then you're blocking all the cables that you can see through the case as well. So I like that it actually gives you quite a few options in terms of fan and radiator placement, and actually allowing you to change the internal layout to a degree. I think more cases should be giving us options like this. And if you saw the side panel when we pulled it off, you'll also notice that it had the vent on the side panel too. So it's not just like a solid side panel there for aesthetics, it's quite functional. Much like the 4000D Airflow, the front panel is removable quite easily. You just pull it off and it comes right out. And it also has a removable fan filter where you can remove that as well. Top panel removal is quite easy too. Same type of mechanism with those clips. You just lift it up and pop it off. Obviously I've got the case laying down so you can see, but yeah, quite easy. And there's also that factory tape holding in the magnetic fan filter. And we'll chat about the fan filters for the whole case in a moment. Front I/O, you've got a power button, 2 USB 3.0 ports, USB Type-C, a combined headphone and microphone jack, and a reset switch. For front panel connectivity and all the other connectors in the case you need to plug into your motherboard, we've got the usual suspects going on here. We've got the power switch and power light. We've got USB 3.0 header, USB Type-C header, audio connector for the front panel audio, SATA or SATA power to power the PWM fan hub, and also the PWM fan cable to plug into your motherboard to control the fan speed from your motherboard itself. There's 2 included 120mm PWM fans that come with the case. We won't be using these, we will be removing these for the build that we do with it, but yeah, there are 2 fans included. It would have been nice if these were white fans, however, the reality is white components as is are very hard to come by, so them including black fans is just something kind of nice, and I suspect that a lot of people who use this case for a build will actually use black components because, like I mentioned, white components are quite hard to get. However, we'll be using as much white componentry as we can in this build. A little bit earlier on in the video, I talked about a few things you can do with the internal layout of this case, which I think are personally pretty nice. It's nice to have these type of options included with the case and not something that you have to purchase separately. This can be removed. So if you're doing some type of water cooling setup and you need the extra space at the front, you can remove this. It's just 2 screws, 2 captive thumb screws. They won't come out. It's a bit fiddly to pull out, but you can pull it out. And now it just looks like this open, ugly, barren place in the case. However, they include this genius bit of plastic. I mean, it doesn't cost case manufacturers a lot of money to do something like this. This is just really nice for them to do. And it allows you to drop in this little bit of plastic here, and you push down and it clips into the base of the case like that. Just clips into the whole thing to block it off. Single captive thumb screw at the back. And now this area looks clean and no cables are going to come through here if you decide to take out the hard drive cage. This needs to happen with more cases. This costs case manufacturers absolutely nothing to include. I want to see this more. This is very, very cool. The only thing is, if I have to be super pedantic about this, is the whites, they don't match. They're not quite the same color, but I don't think it really matters because having this option in the first place is very, very nice. So yeah, I just thought I would mention that because it's not everything's perfect, but matching plastic and paint is quite difficult. I found this out a few weeks ago when we were doing paint matching in my office. A few other changes to the internal layout are this mid plate with a few screws, I think there's 4 screws in total, can be removed, and then you can lift out this mid plate. So if you're using an eATX board, you would then get additional motherboard clearance. And also if you're doing water cooling stuff and you wanted to use this side radiator mount, then you'd probably want to go ahead and remove that as well. Not only that, the front fan bracket, so if you're doing a radiator at the front and you want to get it all set up before and outside of the case, 2 thumb screws, 2 captive thumb screws mind you, can also be taken out and the whole bracket can be removed. Obviously I've still got the fan attached here, but yeah, that is quite a nice little feature. This leads me into talking about the next thing, and that is motherboard and GPU support. So for GPU support, complete maximum with nothing up the front, nothing obstructing it, about 420 millimeters. And as I always say, that measurement there is the complete maximum if you wanted to be doing something like that, but you have to take into account front radiator mounting if you're doing water cooling, pump res combos, the thickness of radiators, all of that stuff needs to be taken into account. As far as motherboard support, you've got ITX all the way up to EATX, which is pretty standard for a case of this size because this case is not very small, although it's not also very big. It's kind of in that size where Corsair has always excelled, making cases that are just about the right size. In case I missed it, I can't remember if I did talk about this or not, but radiator placement for liquid cooling or any type of water cooling you want to do, or just fans in general. 360mm rad up the top, you can fit that quite easily. 360 up the front, 360 on the back, so you can do 3 radiators if you really wanted to. It's going to be quite tricky to do that, to be honest, but you can get creative and you can do it, but there is provisions for doing that. I'd recommend for a custom loop setup 2 360mm rads and you'd be good to go with something like this. Quite a versatile case in terms of radiator placement and fan placement. For air cooling, you've got a maximum CPU cooler height of 170mm, which is quite good too. So you can put some really big chunky air coolers if that's something you wanted to do in this case. And given that this is an airflow focused case, that might be something that you're interested in doing. And last but not least, fan filters. So you've got a fan filter for the side panel. You got a fan filter for the front panel. There's a magnetic fan filter for the top of the case with this little yellow tab to help lift it, and also a bit of Corsair branding, and a power supply fan filter on the bottom of the case as well. That's basically everything I wanted to talk about for this part of the video, but let's build in it. We'll do all the thermals, we'll do all that stuff, and then we'll talk about my final thoughts and a conclusion on this case towards the end of the video. But for now, build time. Let's get right into it. ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the build in the Corsair 5000D Airflow. Let's do what we always do and let's take a look at those thermals that are on your screen right now. And what we're seeing is the performance is actually pretty good. You have to take into consideration 3080s run pretty hot, and also a 5950X very, very hot CPU, and with the 360 cooler and with the way that these fans are set up, this is actually quite good. So what we did is we connected all the fans up to the Commander Pro, and we used the quiet fan profile in Corsair iCUE. It's still on that profile now, and the performance is very, very impressive for this case. All right, let's talk about everyone's favorite bit, the parts. The CPUs, the AMD Ryzen 9 5950X. We put the 5950X on the Gigabyte B550 Vision D. Now, I already know there's going to be comments like, oh, as if you'd put a 5950X on a B550 board. Well, guys, it's literally just for a build, and it's the only white board that we've got that would suit this. It's okay. It's going to be fine. To cool the 5950X, we use the Deepcool Castle 360EX White Edition with a custom Gear Seekers pump top. Now, we always get questions about where we buy these pump tops or whatever. They're not for sale. Deepcool sent them to us, and yeah, like we sent them our logo. They asked if we wanted them and they made them for us. And if you spam Deepcool enough on social media, I'm sure they will find a way to sell Gear Seekers pump top things for everyone with Castle EXs. Do it. Let's make it happen, actually. Kind of keen to see that. For RAM, we've got 32 gigs of Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB, the white version. And as usual, we've used this RAM basically in every white build that we've done. There's two Capellex modules and one of the RAM sticks that are just broken, and I haven't got around to RMAing this RAM yet. I'm gonna do it now. Like after this build's finished, this is gonna be like a little while between white builds. I think that, yeah, it's time to get that finally sorted out. The GPU is the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Vision. Yes, it's a unicorn. It doesn't actually exist. It's a mirage, Claire. Oh. It doesn't actually exist. Oh. And speaking of other things that are mirages, what cables are those?
Shoelaces.
They're shoelaces. Okay, yeah. So we have a set of shoelaces that they're Leon Lee Strimmer Plus cables. I only use the GPU cables. The 24-pin power connector one didn't fit. It was just too much hassle, so I didn't go ahead and do it. I think it looks fine with that white 24-pin power connector anyway. So yeah, just for the GPU power going up and looking like a stream, I just like this effect. If you don't like it, I'm just gonna keep using it anyway. I'm sorry, I'm joking today, guys. I'm in a good mood. Please let me be funny for once. On the 4000D build, we actually got lots of questions from people saying, hey, what RGB strip did you use between the PSU shroud and the edge of the case? Well, it's just a regular old RGB strip. It's nothing fancy. It's just a magnetic one that I jammed in there. And there's actually a cutout in the back corner that you can run the cable through so you can plug it in somewhere else. So you actually can make it look quite neat. The fans that we use 3 Corsair QL fans up the front, 120mm versions, 3 LL fans at the top, and 1 Cooler Master white sickle flow fan, because I thought I had more Corsair RGB fans. Turns out I've only got 6 white ones and like 3 LLs and 3 QLs. So that's all I could go with. If I knew that I didn't have one, I probably would have gone out and bought an additional one before we did this build. So I just had to make do with whatever we had, and I think it turned out all right. What do you reckon, Claire?
Yeah.
Doesn't look too bad with the random Cooler Master fan at the back, right?
Pretty cool.
It's fine, right? It does the job. It suits the aesthetic. All right, so what do we think about the Corsair 5000D Airflow? I actually quite like this case, and there's a couple reasons for it. The first reason is this feels like a return to form for Corsair, and I think the 4000D was the same like that for me as well. However, it wasn't quite as big. You couldn't do as much custom liquid cooling and stuff, and obviously we didn't custom liquid cool this either, but we will be doing one in a black case, which I mentioned at the start of the video. So I do like that they have a case that kind of does a little bit of everything. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with the 5000D. It does do a couple things that I don't like, but I'm willing to overlook them, mainly because it might not be the same for everyone's use case. The first thing is the radiator mounting at the top. Now, they've actually centered the mounting for the radiator at the top which is, it's nice in theory. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of attention to detail in this case, except for this one thing. They should have actually made it less in line with the front, and I get why they did this. It's because if you're doing custom liquid cooling and you're doing a tube run, you can do a straight run between two radiators. Look, that's fine. I understand that. That's actually pretty good for custom liquid cooling. However, you're sacrificing ease of installation and a little bit of internal cable management. If this radiator mount was a bit closer to the edge of the case, so closer to the window side, it would be easier to cable manage on the motherboard. I had a little bit of trouble with the radiator and the fans hitting the EPS power connector. Some motherboards you won't have this problem, but most you will. So just keep that in mind if you're doing top radiator mounting. You will need to be aware of how you're mounting the radiator at the top. But yeah, so it loses points for that. But where it gains points, and I think makes this case really compelling, especially for a case that is kind of designed for custom liquid cooling, the front bracket to remove the front fans is really, really nice. The fact that you can mount fans to the side of the case, which I'm going to be doing when I build a custom loop in it, also very nice. The fact that it's got a mid plate to cover stuff for cable management as well, also very nice. And behind the mid plate grommets too, also very nice. This little plastic cover at the bottom that you can change if you're changing the internal layout slightly, also very nice. So there's all of these nice little bits of attention to detail. Traditionally with Corsair cases, over the last 5 years of Corsair cases, I'm going to be blatantly honest, I haven't really been a fan of anything that they've made because the cases have felt a little bit lazy. From the 4000D and the 5000D, I feel like, again, it's a big return to form for Corsair. A lot of thought has been put into this. They actually sat down and said, hey, look, let's actually make a good case now. The Spec Omega and like some of those kind of weird in the middle cases where they were dabbling with RGB, they weren't so great. The 500D, the 120mm fan would hit the top of basically every single I/O cover. So every time I ever built with one, even off the channel, I had to use cable ties or tweezers to attach the fan on one side to the back, which is actually kind of ridiculous for a case that has a 120mm fan mount at the back. So there was a lot of little things that they missed and they skipped, but this turned out really good. We actually got briefed on this case for CES, like at the, was it like the start of December or something like that? So we knew this one was coming. We've had this one sitting here for a little while. We wanted all the hype and all the stuff to die down from everyone else doing stuff with the case, because I wanted to just take my time with it, which is why the video is a little bit longer. Let me rewind for a sec. Let me just go back and talk about one other thing that makes this case really, really nice to work in. The cable management on the back, even if your cable management is complete, utter rubbish and garbage and it looks like a rat's nest, with that magnetic door on the back, you can hide it. So it's gonna look good. Obviously you're gonna pop it open, you're gonna see a rat's nest in there. It's gonna be like, it's gonna be terrible. But the reality is, for people who aren't so pedantic about cable management, it actually makes the back panel easier to get on, and if you've got cables bulging out everywhere. So cable management, again, with those raceways and just the way that they've done it, it's very, very nice. What I would like to see in the future though, is having screw mounts that line up with SSDs on the back of Commander Pros and stuff like that. So you can screw them into like SSD mounts or even mounting it to the tray on the back side of the motherboard tray, like that removable one for additional SSDs. I actually just double-sided taped it because, you know, that's easier to do it that way sometimes. But a lot of attention to detail, and I truly think that after all these years of Corsair giving us pretty mediocre cases, this is a good return to form for them, and they've taken the hint. It's not too expensive for what you're getting, and just hear me out. Yeah, it's a kind of expensive case. It's 165 US dollars or 225 Australian dollars, but the build quality is really good. And this, look, this is not usually a case I would recommend, but after building with it, I really like it. The airflow is good, it's easy to build in, and the build quality is really solid. And this feels like a proper premium case. And for a premium case, I think 165 US dollars isn't really that much of a hard ask. And not only that though, this case is giving you a lot of space to grow into as well. That Corsair's done a pretty good job with it. So yeah, that's what I reckon. What do you reckon, Claire? Do you like it?
Oh yeah.
You guys like white builds, so we give you guys what you want. And that's basically it from us. Are we done here, Claire? Can we go?
Yeah.
Is it like home time yet?
Yeah.
Can we go home from school?
Yep.
School's back in Australia like this week, right? That's enough. It's enough holidays for you guys. Anyways, guys, if you like the music you heard here, I make all the music. If you want to support the channel, you can either support us on Floatplane, on Patreon. You can get our music on Patreon as well, and early access on Floatplane. That's it. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peak, we seek. And I'm sorry if this video has gone for a really long time. There's just so much to say about this case, and I can feel myself already before editing, cutting out so much of the stuff that I talked about. I've already half edited the video and I've already cut back on a lot of the stuff I talked about in the video, but truly this case is very, very nice. And this is a big recommendation for me, and I don't recommend cases very often, but yeah, I would actually recommend this. This is really, really, really nice. Thanks for watching.